Okay, yesterday I left us with a question. When you look at the language of blessings, you find a break in the grammar. It's most obvious when you have the blessings for a mitzvah, where you say, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, Hashem, Asher Kiddushan b'mitzvah sav, who has sanctified us with His commandments. You start with you and you move to He. That needs an explanation. Normally you don't talk like that, even though there are verses in the Torah which do that. There are such verses. There are a small minority, but there are verses like that. But there too you need an explanation. What does it mean to shift between what we call in English grammar second person and third person? So the first thing to do is ask, what is the difference between you and he? You is second person and he is third person. And the key difference is this. You can say you, why are you, only to someone who's present. You can only use YOU to refer to someone who is present. Whereas HE can be used to refer to someone who's absent. I can't say you to Joe Biden, but I can say he, Joe Biden. It's like the difference between this and that. If I say this book, it's got to be here in front of me. If I say that book, it could be the one I was talking about, it could be anywhere. So, when you say you in a blessing, you're addressing a Kodesh Baruch Hu, as if to say face to face. When you use third person, you say he, that implies there could be a distance, a lack of direct contact. You're just mentioning something about him. Now the truth is that these two grammatical forms are a symptom of a very, very deep theme which is discussed in all branches of the traditional literature. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to us in two different ways. On the one hand, all of our sources agree that, so to speak, His essence, His identity, His ultimate reality is something we don't understand. It's beyond our ability to conceive, to understand, to describe altogether. On the other hand, He manifests Himself to us in various ways that we can't understand. There are certain events that take place which unmistakably indicate His presence, like open miracles. There are the things that He told us about Himself in the prophecies that include the whole of the Tanakh, and other events that took place where historically we can see trends that express His activity. And we have to be conscious of the fact that the Kodesh Baruch Hu exists on both levels, and to recognize that our relationship with Him is on both levels. So, when we make a blessing, what triggers the blessing is something that happens to us, something that we understand. It's something that, in a way that He revealed Himself to us. But we shift to the third person so as not to imply that all there is what we see. We recognize that what we see is only an expression of something that we don't see. You have this in the third blessing of the Shemona Esrei. Atah Kadosh v'Shemcha Kadosh. You are holy and your name is holy. It doesn't mean to say that when you put the four letters Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey together, that's a holy name, you shouldn't erase it, so on and so on. That's not the point. The point is that you have some quality, the you that's beyond our understanding altogether, and the quality would be beyond our understanding altogether as well. And in addition to that, your name, which for us is what we understand of you, what we see and observe of you, also has that quality. So what we do understand as part of our lives has the quality, but the quality has a root in something beyond where we can't understand it. Now, this difference between the second person and third person is carried out not just in simple blessings like a blessing on a mitzvah, but in longer blessings. And here, I don't know, those of you who are looking the video, if you can get hold of a siddur in any language that you understand. Let's take the siddur here, and I'll show you how this distinction in the nature of the person, second and third person, is carried out by the subjects discussed in each case. Before I do that, I want to just make one more reference to this. This is something that I saw in the Kiddush Levi, but they said that other scholars did it as well. Let's take the word mitzvah. Mem tzari vav hey. The last two letters are the last two letters of God's name. The first two letters, mem tzari, in the atbash coding, correspond to Yud and Hey. What is the atbash coding? This is mentioned in the Talmud. The atbash coding is where you associate the first letter and the last letters with one another, Aleph and Tuf. Then the second letter with the next to last letter, Beis and Shin. That's why it's called atbash. And you continue the association inward. So when you do that, the mem is the 10th letter from the end, and the tzadi is the 5th letter from the end. So the mem tzadi in the beginning of the word mitzvah correspond to the letters Yud and Hey, which means that the word mitzvah is really the most proper 4-letter name of the Creator, but 2 letters revealed and 2 letters coded. Not obvious. The last 2 letters, Vav Hey, are revealed, and the first 2 letters, which are Mem Tzadi, code the Yud and the Hey without revealing them. And that means that the word mitzvah embodies the one who is giving the mitzvah and the relationship, the one to whom we are relating by the mitzvah, the Mem Tzadi for the hidden part, that's beyond, and the Vav Hey for the revealed part. So that's an emblem of what we're talking about. Now, if you look at the siddur on the Kiddush for the night of Shabbos, which, if I remember correctly, is on page 360 here in the art scroll. Yes. So the Kiddush has 3 parts. There's the Yom HaShishi, which I'm not going to talk about, and the Rabbi Gottleib I'm not going to talk about. Then there's the final paragraph. Now, if you look carefully at the final paragraph, you can see something which cries out for some kind of explanation. But that's the King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments, took pleasure in us, and with love and favor gave us his holy Sabbath as a heritage. Okay? With love and favor gave us his holy Sabbath as a heritage. Now, skip down to the last line in this paragraph. And your holy Sabbath, with love and favor, did you give us as a heritage. Same thing all over again. You know, the paragraph isn't all that long. Why would you have the very same things in the very same order twice in the paragraph? Oh, but let's look carefully. They're not exactly the same. Because in the first case, it says, with love and favor gave us his holy Sabbath as a heritage. And at the bottom it says, and your holy Sabbath as a heritage. Did you give us as a heritage? So the top one is third person, and the bottom one is second person. That's the difference. So now the question is, what significance does the difference carry? And you can see that if you look at the context in which it takes place. At the beginning, in the first half of the paragraph, where it's third person, with love and favor give us his holy Sabbath as a heritage, a remembrance of creation. The historical reference is to the creation of the universe. But then, the subject changes, a memorial of the exodus from Egypt, for you chose us and sanctified us, and your holy Sabbath with love and favor did you give us. So, the third person reference is connected to the creation. The second person reference is connected to the exodus from Egypt. You close the other door. He's out? Okay, fine. Just close the doors and we'll be okay. Yeah, 2 doors, that's good. Okay, so now let's understand. What's the difference between the creation on the one hand and the exodus from Egypt on the other hand? Well, in the creation, now this may not be obvious, but you have to think about it. In the creation, God hides. No one was present when the creation took place. Man was the last creature. And even the creation of Chava, Adam was asleep, so he didn't observe it. So, we're told that all of this took place, but no one observed it. On the other hand, in the exodus from Egypt, that process leading up to the giving of the Torah is the most spectacular revelation of God in the world that ever took place. It'll only be matched and overmatched by what happens at the time of coming of the Mashiach. So the third person is used when referring to the creation, because there he's distant from us, was not observed, no interaction. And second person is used in context of the exodus from Egypt, where he was open, revealed to us. We together so far? Now watch how this theme is carried out. Take a look in the morning prayers. I'm sorry, in the benching after meals. Here it's in this art scroll.
It's in the 200th and...
This is Brachos Achronos. No.
182.
182? Okay, yeah, thank you very much. 182. So, 183 where the blessing starts. Okay. Now listen, we're going to do a little exercise now and talk about the various blessings, second person and third person. Just remember, the opening and closing, Baruch Atah Hashem, is always second person. That's a formula. That doesn't affect what content is there at all. So ignore the formula. Just look at the specific content of the blessing itself. So here we are on page 184 or 185. And here iScroll gets it right. They do it correctly. Take a look at the blessing at the bottom of the page. First blessing for the nourishment. And first tell me, how is God referred to in this blessing? Second person or third person?
It's a third person.
Third person, all the way through. Okay. Now what is the subject matter of this blessing? What's it about?
Talking about nourishing humanity.
Nourishing humanity, or nourishing the whole living world, right? What aspect of the world provides the nourishment for the world? It's called the laws of nature, right? Doesn't this happen in a natural fashion? We don't have open miracles all the time. Food doesn't grow out of rocks. Food grows on trees. Food grows from the ground, right? These are processes. The atheist is not making just a stupid, prejudiced mistake by not seeing God in the growth of a tree. If he doesn't see God in the exodus from Egypt, he doesn't see God in the parting of the Red Sea, then he's making a stupid, prejudiced mistake. But if he doesn't see God in the growth of a tree, not making a stupid, prejudiced mistake, because God is revealing himself there. The laws of nature hide God's activity. They don't reveal God's activity. So here, if you're talking about nourishment, you're talking about a process in which God is hidden, not revealed. And since he's hidden, the reference to God is all third person. And in the paragraph of Kiddush Friday night, that's how it started. It started with the creation and third person. So we have a parallel. Now let's take a look at the second blessing. That's page 186 and 188. Now, first of all, the exercise in careful reading. I want you to tell me, in those 2 pages, that second blessing, how is God referred to? Second person or third person?
Second person. Your covenant, you taught us, you. You said I have to be more careful, right? But it says you all the time. I mean.
Really? You read all the way to the end, did you?
Okay,
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
You, your name, you, and you, which he gave you. Okay, there is a he.
Oh my. At the end is a he. It's you, he.
Yeah.
Gee. Breaks the continuity, breaks the consistency. How are you going to do with that? You see it?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to ignore it because there it's a quotation from a verse from the Torah. It's not the rabbinic composition. All of the rabbinic composition is you. Second person, direct. Okay, what's the subject matter? What is it talking about?
Well, that's for the land, but it's the covenant that he made with us. Various aspects of it, I would say.
I don't see the word. Oh, well, that's no. The first part is that he gave it to us as an inheritance, not the covenant. First is he gave us the land as inheritance. Then he took us out of Egypt, and he redeemed us from the house of bondage. And then the covenant that he made in our flesh, circumcision, and the Torah that he taught us, and all the laws that he bestowed upon us, and the eating of the food, which he provides us with at all times. Now, all these events are events of open miracles. Whether it's receiving the land, which we conquered miraculously, accompanied with miracles, or leaving the land of Egypt, or receiving the Torah. Those events are events where there were open miracles. And that's why the reference is second person. And then it continues that we give thanks to you for all these things that you gave us. And then we are performing a mitzvah. And the Torah has a verse that tells us to perform the mitzvah, so that the blessing cites that verse, and that verse happens to refer to God in the third person. But the subject here is all of those historical events, and they're all second person. So, and that's exactly what happened in the Kiddush. The second half of the Friday night Kiddush was a reference to the Exodus from Egypt, and it was second person. So it's the same structure that you have in the Kiddush. Okay, now there's a third blessing, which you don't have. You have in the Friday night Kiddush, there are only 2 sections. Here you have a third blessing. Take a look at the third blessing and tell me how is the Kodesh Baruch Hu referred to here? Second person or third person?
In Rachem?
In Rachem, okay.
It's second person.
Yeah, it's second person all the way through. Now here it's a little artificial because a lot of it is requests. And requests, by definition, are going to be made in the second person. But if you look at the historical events that that are mentioned, you have the city of Jerusalem and the resting place of your glory, which is the temple, and the house of David, the kingdom of David. Now, the temple was a place, the first temple anyway, was a place where there were 10 open miracles going on continuously. The smoke that went up from the altar always went straight up. No matter what the weather, it can be windy in Yerushalayim, doesn't matter, always went straight up. The rain never put out the fire. There were no flies. I remember before screens were, I'm very old, before screens were found everywhere, flies were everywhere. This is an abattoir. You're slaughtering animals, you're flaying, taking off the skin, you're butchering them, you're taking the meat and putting it on it should have been inundated with flies and other insects. Nothing. There was nothing there. So the temple was a place where miracles were visible continuously. King David's life is a life in which there were open miracles. Not to mention killing Goliath. Also, when he was protecting the sheep, wild animals attacked him and he was able to overcome them. So, the reference here is second person, and you have the reference to events where he was open and visible. And that fits the pattern. Now, the last blessing is an appendage. The first three blessings are deraisa, they're biblically ordained. The last is rabbinic. Here, it doesn't directly fit the pattern because it's not relevant to the pattern, and because it breaks the pattern. And the reason is this. First of all, how is God referred to in the last blessing? Yeah.
It's third person.
Yeah. It's third person. It's third person all the way through.
Yeah. Besides of the formula.
When we make petitions, but the reference is all third person. Now, what is it about?
About providence.
About providence. That's a good way to put it. About general providence. There's no reference to any particular historical event here. So therefore, my pattern that I'm expressing, where whatever historical event it is, it should fit the person that's used to refer to him. But here there aren't any historical events at all. So the question of the pattern that I'm talking about doesn't even arise. But there's a historical reference. This blessing was made by the rabbis because of the fall of Beitar. Beitar was a very large city, and the Romans conquered it, and they slaughtered all the inhabitants. And they made a decree that we're not allowed to bury the inhabitants, which was it's a disgrace. And what happened was that decree lasted for a period of time, and the bodies remained perfectly preserved, which is an open miracle. Till finally the Romans gave permission and they were buried. So for the miracle of the bodies remaining fresh and not deteriorating, this blessing was made. Now, the thoughtful observer will say, but Rabbi, they all died. This paean of praise, this expression of magnificent praise and thanksgiving, yeah, but they all died. What about that? I think it's a good question. And I think at least part of the answer works like this. We have on record that there are different types of exiles. There are different types of hiding of the divine face. The passage in Sefer Dvarim speaks about astir ponai and haster astir ponai. Astir means to hide, hiding my face, and there are two verses. One is I'll hide my face, and the other is I'll doubly hide my face. Haster astir, the hiding verb is doubled. So the commentators say there's two different kinds of hiddenness, and although there are some different explanations, one explanation works like this. Sometimes things happen, and you know they're coming from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but you can't figure out why. You can't figure out what the justification for them is. That's a single hiddenness. Sometimes things happen and don't look like they're coming from Kodesh Baruch Hu at all. They look as if they're random, or as if they're malevolent, as if they're motivated by evil, by hatred. That's much worse. That's much worse. Like they say, one group said when they're in the wilderness, "B'sina hotzianu," because Baruch Hu took us out with hatred in order to kill us in the midbar. That because Baruch Hu, by definition, doesn't act out of hatred. So that would mean that it's not identifying with the Kodesh Baruch Hu at all. Now think of it in relational terms. My analogy is this: imagine a family that lives in a private house with an acre of land. The 8-year-old has done something very bad. And the father says, "You cannot be in the house with us." And he kicks him out the back door into the backyard. It's an acre of land. That means that there aren't close neighbors. It's nighttime. Okay, there's a fence. They're really in danger, but certainly lonesome out there. And he could be frightened. But he notices that from the house, from time to time, there's a glimmer of light, which means someone is pulling aside the shades to look out at him and check on him. That's one possibility. The other possibility is where, after he's expelled into the backyard, and the back door is locked, he hears the front door open and close, and he hears the car drive away, and the house goes dark. That's a different experience altogether, because now he's really all alone. So here, that's the difference between single hiddenness and double hiddenness. Now, what happened here? The Romans conquered the whole thing and destroyed the temple and everything else. And they conquered Beitar, and they killed the people. But the bodies didn't deteriorate. That's the difference between single hiddenness and double hiddenness. When you see that miracle, yes, it does not compensate for the fact that they all died. But you know you're not abandoned. You know, you can see that it's coming from Kodesh Baruch Hu, because this miracle is on something that only Kodesh Baruch Hu could arrange. So the message here is, this was the inauguration of 1900 years of exile. And really, strictly speaking, the exile still exists, because the majority of Jews are not in the land of Israel. And those of you who think that it's going to be overcome in the near future should meditate on the fact that there are a lot of people in the world who are Jewish and don't know it. And we don't know it either. So it's not so obvious that it's going to be overcome so quickly. So the message is that this period of exile is going to be a period where, although you won't be able to explain why things happen, Kodesh Baruch Hu will not be so hidden as if it were random, accidental, without any guide. And I'll just mention one little thing. This is a subject unto itself, which I can't even begin to work on now. But someone asked, there was a mashgiach in one of the yeshivas in New York, whose name was Shlomo Karlbach, and he was asked about the Holocaust. And he was asked by someone who was inclined to rebel. And he said, so Rabbi Karlbach said back to him, so what's your position? Your position is there is no God, there's no divine providence, then how come we're the ones that get it over and over again? How come there's this consistency that we get it and we get it worst? If the world were really random, you wouldn't have a consistency like that over thousands of years. It wouldn't be like that. That's reading it as not total abandonment. I think that's right. So, what we say here is, in this blessing, we refer to God in third person because it's the beginning of the exile. You're not going to refer to him in second person, not present, not open. But on the other hand, it's an expression of great praise because he hasn't abandoned us to the double hiddenness. That's how I would explain the fact that it's third person, but so much great praise. Okay, we get it so far? Now, there's a section that needs careful analysis. And that is the two blessings in the morning after Baruch Hu, before the Shema. And I'm going to start with the second blessing, which is simple and clear and does express the same pattern. It's the first blessing that needs to be thought about carefully. So, take a look on page
84.
89, the second blessing. Ava Rabbah in the Ashkenazi version. So this is the middle of page 84 until the Shema. I'm sorry, this I didn't say. I should have said 89. Sorry, it's on 89. In the middle of the page, with abundant love, up until the Shema on 91. How is God referred to in this blessing?
I see second person so far. It's second person.
Yeah, second person is you all the way through. Yeah. And by the way, the very fact that it's consistent that way shows that this has been chosen. It's not arbitrary. Okay, now, what events are mentioned in this paragraph?
Is the love of Hashem an event, or
Galus?
is like the background?
That's background. But what about you taught us the decrees of life? That's giving us the Torah.
Right.
The most spectacular revelation of God's presence in the history of the universe. That's one. And then may we exult and rejoice in your salvation, bring us in peace from the four corners of the earth, leads with upright pride to our land. That's referring to the ultimate redemption, which is going to take place with spectacular miracles, even more so than the Exodus from Egypt. So the two historical references here are references to events in which God reveals himself, and also the whole references in second person. So that fits the pattern that we have said. And now, if you go back to 85, we have a real puzzle. Given the consistency that we have seen, what we see here, I'm going to take you through it, is an alternation back and forth between second and third person. So, we'll start with He provides, because the first part is the blessed are you that we said is the formula.
Which is from the book of Isaiah.
Yeah. He provides illumination. So that's He, right? And His goodness is He renews daily by the works of creation. That's the first sentence. How great are your works, Hashem? You make them all with wisdom, the world is full of your possessions. The King who was exalted and sounded before them, who was praised, glorified, upright in the days of old. And if in the Hebrew, that's third person. You don't see it here in the English, but it's third person. Eternal God, with your abundant compassion, second person. Shield of our salvation. The blessed God, who is great in knowledge, He prepared and worked on the rays of the sun, but that's one for His name, around His power, His legions, His sanctity. Next, may you be blessed, Hashem our God, beyond the praises of your handiwork, bright luminaries that you have made. May we be blessed, our rock and our king, and our Redeemer, creator of the holy ones. May your holy name be praised forever, our King. So it's back and forth, until this spot. And then when it goes on, who forms ministering angels, it switches to third person, and it's third person all the way to the end. So this is not random. This is not accidental. Something happened here. The majority of the blessing is third person. I would say about 70%. There are interruptions with various second person. The subject is creation. Creation of the luminaries, the angels, which are beyond our understanding and beyond our perception. So it certainly fits the third person reference. But what are all the second person references doing here? I puzzled about this for a long time. I got into this because I was waiting for my Rabbi Zatzal, and in his building in Boston, he had at least 3,000 volumes of Jewish sources. And I picked one off the shelf at random. I opened to a random page, and on that page I saw this difference between second and third person. So first of all, I was very embarrassed because I was a Hebrew speaker at the time, and it never occurred to me. I believe it was the Nefesh HaChaim that I picked up, though I didn't know the name of the Sefer when I picked it up. And I thought to myself, wow, second person, third person, look at that. And then I started working on it. So I worked out these consistencies. When I came to this, I was really stymied for months. But I figured it out. I believe I figured it out. The types of sentences that you have here are not the same. All the third person sentences are declarative. They are statements of fact. Such and such is the fact. Those sentences are all third person, he. All the other sentences are not declarative. Now, they're not the same among themselves, but none of them is declarative. Some of them are petition, some of them are exclamations, some of them are wishes, may it be the case. None of them are declarative. You could have said a declarative sentence with you. You are great. It's a declarative sentence with you. You could have, but it's not true. So I understand it as follows. The sentences that refer to God in the second person are where we express our attitudes, our feelings, our responses to the facts. Where we are simply describing the facts. That's what we do it in third person. If I make a petition, so then I'm requesting something from you. If I praise you, I'm expressing my awe, my appreciation for the greatness of what you've done. If I'm offering a wish, I'm saying that I identify with your values and your priorities, and I'm hoping that what you will for the universe will come true. So I'm expressing how I feel about these things. When I do that, I use second person. That's what I've said up to here is fact. I understand that in expressing these feelings, I'm expressing them as part of a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. I'm expressing them to Him because I want to recognize that kind of interaction with Him. This is interspersed with the major text, the 70%, which is just third-person recitation of facts. It's as if to say, this recitation of facts shouldn't be left as something that's cold. It shouldn't be left as something that's detached from the interaction and commitment that we have to one another. Something that should be expressive of that. But the very fact that you have a perfect grammatical consistency here shows that it was chosen, it was planned. So this is an illustration of rabbinic liturgy, the language that they use, the conceptual structure, that which they invested in the text that we recite so often. And I think I hope it would inspire you to make the effort to study. There are many, many books, even in English, on the prayers. And they have lots and lots of very, very important insights. Many of the things in the prayers are quotations of verses from the Tanakh. Then you can look up the verse, you can look up the commentaries on the verse. I will leave you with one final thought. In the last blessing, we don't have time to go through it in detail, but the last blessing after the Shema, before the Shemona Esrei, you have a phrase which we haven't seen in any of the texts so far, and that phrase, which is repeated 5 times in that blessing, is Ato Hu. You are He. That's really striking. There, the rabbi said, this is both. This subject is both. not just revealed, it's not just hidden. This subject is both. The subject there is geula, redemption. The ending of that blessing is unique because the ending of that blessing is in the past tense. All the other endings, almost all, the endings are in the present tense. We describe what God is doing all the time. There, it's Go'al Yisrael. He's redeemed the Jewish people. And it's very striking because in the middle of Shemona Esrei, we have the same word, but it's present tense. Go'al Yisrael is redeeming. So it's not redemption that requires a past tense. So I have heard the following idea that maybe redemption has a double feature. In a certain sense, the creation of our world is a creation of golus, of exile. Because, as Hashem says, the soul comes into this world and it is exiled from the absolute attachment that it had to the Creator before it came into this world. The very fact that it is associated with the body means that there's a barrier between it and the full expression of its spirituality. So it's a kind of exile. That exile is temporary. That exile is only for the sake of recovering that relationship in a much enhanced form. So geula, redemption, is built into the creation. It's built into the process of exile. The process of exile is for the sake of a greater connection. So even though in the process of running through this world, we often don't see the redemption operating, it's always there. It's a guiding principle that underlies everything that happens. Sometimes we see it. There are plants which grow on an underground runner, horizontally under the ground, and from time to time they push up a stalk, and then they grow further, and they push up another stalk. And if the soil is loose enough, you pick it up at one place, you can get a whole long string. So there's the underground runner, which you don't see, and there's a stalk that comes up. That means it's always there, because the underground runner covers the whole ground. But you don't see it a lot of the time. That's what redemption is like. Redemption is operating all the time, and that's why it's an atohu. It's sometimes revealed, but it's sometimes hidden. That's one way to possibly explain what's going on there. Well, one thing that you see is that the persons that are used to refer to Kadosh Baruch Hu is very important. And now that you know that, you will notice as you go through the Torah verses where it shifts back and forth between second and third person, or sometimes when Kadosh Baruch Hu is speaking first and third person. Kadosh Baruch Hu will refer to himself as I, and then refer to himself in the third person. When there are those shifts, you pay attention, because you see that those shifts are very meaningful, and that the rabbis took that distinction and used it in the text that they used to create the prayers. Yeah.
I mean, is there any relationship between the second and third person implementation with the portions that we decide to say loudly? For example, is there why do we specifically say these parts loudly in the tefillah and not?
No, I don't think there's any relationship whatsoever between whether it's second person or third person. What you say aloud and what you don't say aloud. No.
So what, do you know?
Each one has its own. Each one will have its own reason. It's not a single idea.
Oh, yes.
Each one, I don't have to go through it in detail. Each one have a different reason. Okay.